Welcome back to Wrestling Changed My Life podcast. This is your host, Ryan Warner. Folks, it's a beautiful night here in Chicago. Hope you're having a great evening, enjoying some of this nice weather. Today's guest is Tyler Clark. Tyler was a Quad City legend, back in the 2000s, my heyday. Was a Fargo national champ and had the unique pleasure of wrestling for both Cael, Sanderson, and Tom Brands in college, which is something not many people can say. And now he's a really successful sales rep for Stryker. And so, per usual, we get into some of my favorite topics: discipline, overcoming setbacks, self-talk when you're in one of those pressure cooker moments. So it's some of my favorite things, and we really had a good time with this conversation. So appreciate y'all listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.
Well, I was a fanatic. There's no doubt, a fanatic. My goal was to get carried out of the wrestling room because of exhaustion, and it never happened. The thing it did for me every day about 6 o'clock is that when I got out, I looked back in and there was nobody else there. Bottom line was I didn't reach my goal. So guess what happened? I went back in the room again. But I got some quality time because of just some kind of a fanatic goal.
All right, Tyler Clark, welcome to the podcast, my friend. How are you?
I'm pretty good. About yourself?
Doing good, man. It's summer's upon us. We're getting ready to talk some wrestling right now, so I'm in a good place, brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you and I go way back, probably right around middle school, wrestling together, going to tournaments together. But I'd love just to start. You had a lifetime in wrestling. Maybe just talk to listeners through your journey through the sport and kind of where you're at now with your life.
Yeah. So I probably started back when I was maybe 3 or 4, right around that age. My dad was the kids club coach out in Orion and Illinois. And so he kind of just sat me down. He's like, hey, do you want to come, start coming to wrestling practices with me and seeing what it's about? And that was kind of my introduction. And, I went and kind of ran around and had fun and didn't really get into anything competitive for a couple of years. It was more like just going in and run around kind of thing for the first couple of years. And, started getting some competitions. It's always kind of funny looking back on old videos if anyone else still has them. One of the funny things I used to do was I was also in gymnastics at the time, which I'm still a huge advocate of the gymnastics world. But I would take someone down and then I'd get up and I'd do like a running round off, and I get so excited. And I didn't really understand the concept of riding people or turning people to their back or pinning. I just was all excited to take someone down. And so I always had to show a way to celebrate that. Pretty funny to go back and look at the video of that. And then it kind of grew from there. I became more and more involved with the sport. My dad and my parents were firm believers in not over pressuring me to go to everything and be at every meet and travel around at a young age. They said, pick the sports you want to do and go for them. We're going to be behind you. So I tried my hand at wrestling, as I said, gymnastics, football, basketball, baseball, and you kind of name it. I did it. And as I started getting in the middle school age, I kind of teetered out on the basketball. Obviously, I'm about 5'5". That wasn't going to be my specialty.
Right.
I think probably at the time I was maybe 4 foot tall, so getting into the rim was a challenge. And so I dropped off the basketball. I dropped off the gymnastics, and I continued with baseball, wrestling, and football. And I started having success in probably my 7th grade year. Won my first state championship in 7th grade, and did it again in 8th grade. And I think at the time I was still about 85 pounds. And, the lowest weight class in high school was 103. So that next summer was about trying to figure out how to get, some size on. And that was always, something I battled with was I was always a pretty small person in small weight. And dropped off baseball, and then I played 1 year of football in high school and realized obviously a 100-pound, 5'1" person was not going to make it in the football realm. Yeah, Walter Payton was always my big hero of mine, and I was not going to turn into a Walter Payton. So I focused on wrestling, and when I did that, I didn't go to a lot of national tournaments early. It was a lot of local stuff and just a lot of hours in the room. And I dedicated myself to the sport, and I bought in and 2 feet in. And
so what was it about it? Like, what was it about it when you made that decision to dedicate your life to the sport? Like, did you say, okay, these are my goals. I want to wrestle at Division I level. I want to be a state champion, et cetera, et cetera. Like, how did you kind of make that mental switch to that commitment? And why'd you do it? Like, what'd you like so much about it?
Obviously one of the biggest things that I still enjoy about the sport today, and something, we can talk about it later on, is the if you want to say blame or the discipline is on yourself. So you play a team sport. I get it. There's other people that can contribute to the team. You have a great point guard. You have a great center, quarterback, wide receiver. The one thing I loved was my success or my failures were on me. I had no one else to point the finger at or point the blame at. If I was out of condition, if I wasn't strong enough, if I didn't have the technical skills, I could look myself in the mirror and say, you need to go ahead and fix this. You need to work this out. And so being an individual sport and then tied to, a team or a club, where, the collective group had success based on individual performances. If you want to say that really made me dive in. I just enjoyed that aspect of it. And obviously the competition, right? One other person out there going at it. I mean, who has the strength, the stamina, the skills? I mean, I think at the time, I want to say Gladiator was a pretty popular movie.
It was.
So,
it was.
So I kind of looked at myself as being in the arena, right? Being a gladiator out there, as maybe as cheesy as that sounds, but I mean, that kind of is what drew me to commit to it. And, I think that answered your question, probably.
Yeah, no, it did. And you said a couple of things there. So the self-awareness aspect is big because, like, to your point, if you're not getting the job done and you're not self-reflective on why you're not getting it done, you're going to struggle, and you're going to continue to struggle because you're not going to change your strategy. So do you remember any tough moments maybe where you had a loss or didn't perform to your ability, where you had to have that tough conversation with yourself and kind of self-reflect on what you're going to change moving forward, even all the way through college maybe?
Yeah. I had one of those, several of those moments, but I can tell you the first real time it kind of set in. And after that, I had bought in. I was a sophomore in high school. I want to say sophomore. Yep. And was at Fargo. And coming in the tournament, going at cadet duels. I was a dual stylist, both Greco and freestyle. I went undefeated in Greco duels. I went undefeated in freestyle duels. They always kind of do pre-seeds, even though it's not really seeded, but favorites. And I was the favorite in both styles, and made it to the finals in Greco. And I lost to a guy named Bo Torres. He's from Ohio. You always remember your losses, which is everyone remembers that. Lost to a guy named Bo Torres, great competitor. Wrestled him at the duels that year, and I remember beating him. Couldn't tell you what the score was, but beat him at the duels. We met in the finals, and he ended up beating me 3-1 in the finals. And also that year before, obviously Fargo, I had won Folk Style Nationals. So I was set to win the Triple Crown. That was a goal I wanted it. And, I did everything I could to win it. And, so I lost, right? Took second, and then I had to bounce back within 2 days. weigh-ins for freestyle were the next day. Freestyle tournament started 2 days later. Yep. So outside of cutting weight, I had to kind of step back and take a look at what happened, where I overlooked someone, or I thought it was an easy road because I had a victory before going in, and kind of had to reevaluate my way I was going to attack the freestyle portion of that tournament, really in a short period of time. And ended up wrestling Bo in freestyle. Probably, maybe the first day, maybe the second day of the tournament, I can't remember. And ended up beating him, I think, 10-0. And so I had a little bit of redemption on myself. I I can't say, at that time, I think that was probably one of the most fired up matches I had been in a long time, because I had that burning desire of redemption, of the comeback, and it still is a fresh wound. And I was angry. I was fired up, and ended up winning Fargo that year in freestyle. And I'm still missing my Triple Crown, but still I had some.
I didn't know you won Fargo that year. Man, I didn't realize that. Okay, wow. So that's what separates the people who achieve success in life, though, is when they get knocked down. And I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'm reading this book right now, and this is like a theme in this chapter. But when they get knocked down, when you have a setback, you don't completely collapse mentally. You actually get better because of it, right? And maybe if you would have beat him in Greco, maybe you wouldn't attack him in freestyle. Who knows? But because of that obstacle, or because of that loss, you rebounded and freaking pushed through it. So that's just such a rare thing. Even amongst high performers, like the ability to bounce back like that is just so impressive. And like when I think back to watching you wrestle, what always struck me was how confident and how loose you were going into the matches. Like you didn't seem that tight. At least it didn't seem like it. So like, do you remember like what your self-talk was like going into matches, or if you were back in the tunnel, like what were you thinking? Were you, I don't know, loose? Were you thinking about other things to keep yourself relaxed? Like, kind of walk us through that a little bit.
I can't say I became loose until I probably was in college. Okay. I always kind of had to get like, quote unquote in the zone, before a match. Music, I think you probably walk into any tournament, any sport, and they're going to be listening to music, right? That's kind of people's escape, how they block things out, and they kind of are able to get in their own mind and focus themselves. An artist that was big at the time was Linkin Park. They still have had success, and the lead singer, passed away, if you want to say, a couple years ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago, Chester Bennington. Sad day, but that was a sad day because I looked back and they were kind of the music I listened to when I was trying to focus on wrestling, but I kind of had to just focus on what I did. Everyone, they kind of always talked about watching game film, or even football, basketball, watching game film, studying tape, and know what your opponents do, and it's good to be aware of that. And it's something I just didn't do. I didn't look at tape because at the end of the day, I want to be aware of maybe something certain. But if I did that, I focused too much on what my opponents could do or what they were focused on doing, where I needed to be focused just on what I did and how to execute my attacks, my strategy, my game plan. And so I kind of I did that. So, shadow wrestling, just focusing on how I wanted the match to go.
Yep. Well, I had Jake Herbert on, and he kind of talked about, like, before, like 10 minutes out or longer, he was doing anything but thinking about the match. He was like just thinking about his friends, or he was talking with his family. But then like 10 minutes out, maybe when he was in the hole or something like that, like this switch would flip and he would start talking to himself and getting himself all fired up. He's like, no one's worked as hard as I have, et cetera, et cetera. He went down this whole rat hole of like getting himself jacked up. So I was just wondering if you ever did that, because I think of people who maybe let self-doubt creep in, and you're not one of them. just based on my memory of going to tournaments together. That's kind of where that question was coming from.
Yeah, I mean, right. It's a great point that, that he made and you made is anytime doubt creeps in, I mean, you open the question, you open up a door that almost like a Pandora's box of what could happen if I don't do this? What could happen if I lose? What could happen if I don't perform? Who could I let down? Right? Those are terrible questions to ask yourself. And as he said, not things you should be thinking about. It's thinking about things that you've done right. What did I do right? And at the end of the day, if you know you did them, you're going to feel confident. You're going to feel good, right? Now, if there's any type, and it's about self-reflection, and kind of the same thing when I said I could look myself in the mirror and say, you need to improve here. It's at the end of the day, could you look at yourself and say, did I give everything I had? And no matter what that task was, if it was a conditioning training or a strength training, did you hold back? And if you didn't, then when you go into matches and you go into competition, you have no fear of that because you gave it everything that you had to prepare for that. And so for me, those types of questions didn't necessarily creep in because I knew kind of the same thing. No one's worked harder than I have. I've given the time, I've given the hours, if not multiple hours above anyone else. This is what I'm meant to do, kind of thing. And at the end of the day, the biggest thing I always did was right before I went off, I was always serious and always had this kind of state. I always say this just a seriousness.
Scowl, maybe? I say a scowl.
Yeah, like a scowl, right? Then I try to turn that off and be like, now let's go have fun, right? Let's try, but let's have fun, right? And that was a big thing when I was growing up. I mean, when I was in high school and in middle school and high school, I just had a lot of fun. And, we can get into college years, and I think, for me, that kind of changed to more of a job than having fun. And, maybe I didn't experience the success I wanted to at that level, maybe because that mentality shifted in my mind. And so, yeah.
So that's a good segue because you wrestled for maybe excluding John Smith, excluding Tom Ryan, the two probably best college coaches in the last 20 years, Tom Brands and Cael Sanderson, when Cael Sanderson was at Iowa State. Am I remembering that correctly? Was he there still?
Yeah, Cael first. I was at Iowa State first, but yeah.
Right, and then Iowa, yeah. So talk about, what's amazing to me is, and I've had a former Penn State guy on this, Aaron Onspach, who wrestled heavyweight at Penn State before Cael came, but then was a head coach of the Nittany Lion Club when Cael was there. And he kind of talked about just how he gets people to relax and compete. So, I mean, you wrestled for Cael firsthand. I'd love to just hear you kind of talk for a few minutes on, what was he doing back at Iowa State, and what do you think he's doing at Penn State to get those guys to get excited to compete versus maybe getting nervous because they just freaking go and they let it rip out there, man. What do you think that is for him?
What's the term? Let the fur fly, I think, is a term that I've heard using that. Someone asked me this not that long ago, the difference between, the experiences I had between both programs, both coaches, and what I can tell is different. And it's still kind of hard to wrap my head around just the differences, but Cael was
for example,
such go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, it seems like the Penn State guys, or Iowa State, whatever, to put it this way, Cael versus Tom Brand, what it seems like is the guys who wrestle for Cael, they put more of an emphasis on improving and wrestling, as well as they can, versus the Iowa guys put a focus on winning. Whereas with Cael's guys, winning just happens if you're wrestling loose, if you're getting better. But with the Iowa guys, maybe they wrestle a little bit tighter because they're focused so much on winning. That's just one observation. I could be way off. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I would say personally, you're probably, just from my experience, I would say it seems like it could be an accurate statement. You can't put your head in the mind of any wrestler out there.
No.
And how they work and how they practice and what they're thinking before and during and after a match. But yeah, they're very clashing, I think, coaching styles. My experience, Cael was very relaxed and really focused on having fun. Like he tried to make everything just as fun and like you said, and learn and grow as possible. He made games out of things. I don't know. It was, yeah. I mean, that's the best way to kind of say it. He tried just to have everyone have fun. It was so fascinating and kind of amazing to watch. We'd be in practices and he would just invent a move, create it out of nowhere. And he'd be like, guys, come here and look at this real quick. I just made this up. What do you think? And like, what do you think about this? Do you think it would work? Go try it a few times. I want you to try it and tell me and give me your feedback. I mean, and it just like out of nowhere. Like he had this innate ability to see things that other people didn't. And it was really cool. It was really cool to see. It was a sad day to see him leave. When I was at Iowa State, I chose to stay in the state of Iowa for personal reasons. Nothing against him at all. And I thought he was a phenomenal coach. There's a lot more, personal reasons there of why I stayed.
Sure.
And
sure.
Yeah. And then, and then I went into an environment where, the Iowa wrestling rooms brands are still relatively, new in the area, I guess. I can't remember how many years they were in at that time. But you had super, super intense guys, Tom Terry, Doug Schwab, Mike Zadek. I know there's some others, maybe drawing a blank on.
Was Freyer there?
I don't think Freyer was there when I came.
Okay.
I don't remember if he was or I don't remember if he was or not. Those are the four that always just stick out in my mind. And it was, it was a different, it was something so different. I mean, I remember my first day of practice. Cael, like our practices at Iowa, Iowa State, were kind of structured and time goes, live goes, things like that. And then I remember one of my first days at Iowa. If you remember a guy named Dan Dennis, I knew Dan from middle school and high school.
Dude. Yeah.
And Dan and I were roommates, when I came to Iowa. And great guy. I love Dan Dennis. And, we went to the room and he was kind of trying to, explain how things are going to be. And, we sat down and they said, all right, practice on your own. And, I was like, what does that mean? I'm looking at Dan, I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, basically we warm up, we get ready to go, and we just wrestle live for as long as we want, like as long as you want. Last guy, it's kind of like a last guy standing thing.
And what, is this early in the season or is this like February?
Yeah,
what part of the year?
Like preseason, right?
Okay.
So it was, right when I kind of came on, and it was just different. It was something I hadn't been used to, and I wasn't used to, and so it was different, and there was an adjustment period to it. But I'm not sure that goes in comparison to the coaching styles really at all. But
no, I mean, it's just I'm sure people have asked you that question your whole life, and it's a tough one to answer, but it's just such a rare thing because it's been a long time since Cael was in Iowa, and to have someone wrestle for both programs, kind of, that was when Iowa was kind of in their heyday, so it was just, and I'm the biggest Iowa fan there is. I love Iowa. So it's just so fascinating to me, but you got to respect what Cael's doing and how those guys wrestle. It's so incredible to watch, Yeah,
it is. You can't say anything. It is very incredible to watch. Yeah. I mean, some of those guys that have gone through that program, the Rutherfords, the Bo Nichols, the David Taylors. Gosh, I remember when David Taylor was in high school. I knew him in high school. He was a great kid then. They've made it extremely fun to watch. They go out and they score a boatload of points, and they look like they're having fun doing it. And it just makes a fun sport to the sport fun to watch.
Which is ironic because when Gable and those guys were doing their thing, like when Tom Brands was wrestling or when Joe Williams was wrestling, that's what they were known for, scoring a lot of points. And don't get me wrong, Iowa still does that. But, like, Penn State kind of does that now, and that was always their thing, you know? I mean, like Royce Alger, those guys were scoring a ton of points back in the 80s. So it's just so there's just so
Randy
many
Lewis,
comparisons.
Randy Lewis, Royce Alger. I mean,
Steiner,
you could go.
Brands, all of them. Yeah. Barry Davis.
Yeah, Barry Davis.
Those guys were scoring machines, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of guys around the area that scored a lot of points, but yeah.
For sure. So I want to shift into a couple more, I guess I call them rapid fire questions that we usually spend about 5 minutes on each. But, you know, you've gone into sales, which I'm equally as passionate about sales as I am about wrestling now. I've been doing it about 5 years. I think it's awesome. I don't think a lot of people know that it's a viable career path. I know I didn't until I had some mentors introduce me to it. But it's awesome because it reminds me a lot about wrestling in a number of ways. One, you're on a sales team, but like the team really doesn't impact your performance, right? It's an individual sport, but you're still on a sales team just like you are a wrestling team. And the amount of work you put in is most of the time indicative of the results you get. So kind of just talk to me about, like, what has wrestling taught you and how do you use that every day in your sales game? Because I know you've had a lot of success in sales. So maybe it's kind of, how is that parlayed into that sales world that you're in now?
Yeah. So you kind of even already answered a lot of those questions, and it came kind of back from the self-reflection side of things, right? So, you know, at the end of the day, your success in sales or within the company you're with or is all based on you, right? You don't have anyone to go back and look in the mirror and say, I didn't succeed today because of this, you know. Everyone can make excuses for things, but at the end of the day, it's on your head and it's on you to go and perform or do something with your customers or, you know, gain trust somewhere, like build a relationship, all these things that at the end of the day, it's on you. So, you know, but we all have quotas, you know, in sales, we all have quotas. And at the end of the day, we have a goal. We have a goal we want to get to, and we take a step every day towards that, right? You know, whether that's one step or 5 steps or anything, you're always trying to take one more step forward and not take any back. And when you do take a back step, you learn from that. You know, we all have defeats, we all lose a little bit, and we all have learning experiences. So we take those and we put in our arsenal and figure out where we went wrong and correct it so it doesn't happen again. Same way you would do in wrestling, right? And
Right.
So a lot of the parallels there are, you know, just the individualistic performance contributes to a team. So then I have a team of 11 guys that are all held to their own number in their own specific territories that collectively we have a group number to hit for our manager. And so, I mean, you can kind of really look at that as you got a head coach that's given an assignment to do, and he's got 10 or 11 guys under him that each have to perform at their highest, you know, potential for the team to be successful. And it's almost a spitting image parallel to how a wrestling program works.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It really is, man. And before we got started here, you mentioned, you know, a lot of times, if you're with your friends, your colleagues, you know, they'll talk about wrestlers being a different breed. Like, what do you mean by that, Eric? I guess, what does that mean to you, so to speak, in terms of your...
Being a different breed of person, yeah. It's a comment I get a lot, you know, oh, he's a wrestler, he's a different breed, right? And I don't know, at first I didn't know how to take that, and I've kind of learned to own it as a way when we feel we're a different breed, like no one outworks the wrestler. Like it's hard to find someone that outworks the wrestler because of the energy, the passion, the endurance we have, the discipline, the grind. I mean, everyone talks about in college, like going through the grind and bettering yourself, even on days you don't feel good or you don't want to do it, you still got to wake up and do it. And I think that's just been ingrained in my head since I was a kid. And so I wake up, you know, every day and I'm like, a grind, right? You know, there's days that I feel great, like feel good, and there's days where, you know, I don't take sick days. Like that's just another thing that no matter how bad I feel, I still have a job to do because that's just the person I am. And so, yeah, hearing that when someone say, "Oh, he's a different breed," it's kind of funny to hear, but I enjoy it, and I kind of like that terminology, if you want to say that nowadays, because people relate that to something very good, especially in my company. There's a lot of very successful people within my company, Stryker, that have come from wrestling. And so they have kind of set a precedent for when a wrestler does come into the sales world. They're like, okay, yep, he's a different breed, or, you know, she's a different breed of person. Yep. They're gonna, okay, kind of thing. And it's like, we're just
they're freaking savage. Yeah. Absolute animal. And I think that the last thing I'd love to know about is, like, what's a day in the life look like for Tyler Clark these days? Like, are you like a regimented guy in terms of your morning routine? I mean, you're working out up still, I'm sure, but like, what does that look like for you?
Well, you know, it's my days do vary a little bit. So, I sell for a med device company. So sometimes my days revolve around surgeries, and in the hospital that I provide to and service, and the docs that I work with. But, you know, I'd say this last year's been a little different since, you know, year and a half, I guess. Gosh, maybe even more. So I have a daughter now. She's about 20 months old. So that's kind of thrown a wrench in my what I would say was a normal day in my life. And all the personal time I used to have is kind of gone, you know, away, and I'm trying to focus on family when I get home. But, you know, it's waking up early, hitting the pavement early for me.
What time do you wake up? 5 or 6 or 4:30?
I usually get about 4:30. Usually get about 4:30. You know, between 4:30 and I guess 5. I decide to snooze for 30 minutes. Then I hammer out some emails in the morning before I hit the road. I try and be in my first place before 6:30. In my world, surgery starts pretty early, 6:30 to 7 some places. So try and get there early, doing what I can, scheduling meetings around the day. And then actually I actually stopped lifting weights a few years ago, and I picked up rugby. So I play rugby twice a week. Then I have rugby games on the weekend, and that's been just a phenomenal release, if you want to say release, but just the transition from wrestling to rugby has just been fantastic. I can't say it's probably become hands down my second favorite sport, and it's just I have a blast. I have a blast doing it. Great camaraderie with friends, like the guys I play with, the friends I play with, and if anyone knows out there knows about rugby, I play scrum half. If anyone knows what that is, it's you guys.
Yeah, I know nothing about it, brother, but I'm fascinated because it just seems like a guy's sport, man. You're out there freaking getting after it. You're running around. I mean, how exhausted are you after a rugby game?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, soreness and like stiffness sets in probably like 30 minutes after a game. You're out there playing 40-minute halves, and no pads, hard, brutal, hard contact. But it's fun, man. It's a lot of fun, and it's kind of a guys, I don't know, guys, but I mean, afterwards, no matter like what you say about the other team during the match, at the end of the day, you walk off the pitch and you shake hands and you have a beer and you say, man, that was a great stinking game. Love the tenacity, and it's great. So, I've enjoyed that for the last few years, as well as kind of helping out coaching when I can. I just kind of do more volunteer work when I'm available.
It's so tough. Like I thought about it too, because after we stopped running the Outlaw Club when I moved to California, like I wanted to get back into coaching, but dude, now I think about how much time those high school coaches put in. Like I don't know how they did it. Like I don't. Sometimes I'll work till 6, and the last thing I want to do is go hang out somewhere else for 2 hours. It's like it's such a commitment to coach high school wrestling. I'm just so blown away by the people who do it. So.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge commitment, and I did it. I coached high school out at West Branch, Iowa, when I was right out of college, and then I ran a kids club in Bettendorf, Iowa, and then like I said, when I moved down to Missouri, I helped out at a high school down here, and for me, and like you said, there's some days where you don't get off work till 6 o'clock, and my schedule is very fluid. I don't have you start at this time, you get off at this time, like a 9-to-5 job. It's fluid. It's based on schedule, like meetings, surgeries, where I got to go. And, at the end of the day, I couldn't always promise to be there at 3:30, 4 o'clock for a practice start.
Right.
And so that's always,
exactly.
That was always a struggle for me, that I didn't want to commit to being an on-staff coach anywhere because I couldn't always guarantee that I could be there. So that's where I enjoyed the freelance coaching work, where I come in and help out whenever I could and whenever I could. And that's been fun. That's kind of kept me in shape a little bit, but yeah.
Last question before I let you go here. Did I see somewhere online that you're into bow hunting now, or archery at least?
Yes. That is another passion. Passion. So I love and I enjoy competitive target shooting. I do bow hunt. I have fun with that. It's something me and my dad do. But competitive target shooting is a lot of fun. It's really monotonous, and like when I say that, it's routine. So when you go through your shot sequence, like from your breathing technique to the way you draw the bow, or the way you hold your hand position, to how you release. Like, I use a hinge release, which if there's any bow hunter target shooters out there, a hinge release or, back tension release are great. But yeah, that's something I enjoy doing. Some people love golf, right? It's kind of the same thing. It's routine, it's rhythm. You got to have, swing the club at the same time over and over again. It's kind of the same process with competitive target shooting, because you're aiming at an X that's the size of a quarter, 20 yards away. And so trying to hit that spot every single time involves a lot of, discipline and routine work and practice. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
I'm trying to do a lot of things.
Man,
trying to get involved
the reason I ask is that I'm a huge fan of the Joe Rogan podcast, and that guy's, massive archery guy. And so my brother Tanner and I were thinking about, like, hey, how can we pick up a new hobby other than just kicking it with our friends? And that one seems really fun. And I think wrestlers have just like addictive personalities where they go all the way in with something, and like, you don't just have a bow, you freaking do competitions, right? So I just had to ask while we're on the phone here, because I think it's just something that seems really appealing to me.
Yeah, that's the competitive side of me. Everything's a competition.
Right.
That's kind of the person I am. I don't care what it is. I'm probably going to find a way to make it a competition.
Right.
In some capacity. Even with my wife, I do the same thing. We always have little competitions here and there. It's just my nature. So.
Absolutely. Well, man, I really appreciate you doing this. It was good to catch up with you. And I know you're moving back to the QC, so maybe we'll grab a beer next time I'm back, man. But, wish you nothing but the best.
That's the end of this episode, but definitely not the end of the show. For more episodes, please go to wrestlingchangemylife.org. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Give us a star rating. Show the love, baby. Show the love. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon. Peace.